So welcome folks who are checking out the recording to catch up. We're just talking about who our helpers are. We have all different kinds of helpers. Sometimes they're physical, sometimes they help us process our thoughts or emotions. Sometimes they're our spirit helpers. We have a really great list running in the chat. So that's always makes me happy. And cats, right? Oh my gosh. Even though cats are total little jerks sometimes, they can be super helpful too, right? Very healing. They know, animals seem to know, and kids know when we're hurting or when we need a little extra loving. They just jump right in there, don't they? All right. So let me see if I can get back into the main screen. So today we're going to cover the final two modules of the entire curriculum, the core skills of advocacy, and then how do we take care of ourselves, when we're providing advocacy? What does that look like to take good care of ourselves? And we'll have Linda join us. She's on the road right now, but she'll be joining us to help with that final module of the day. And then we'll go through the process for getting the evaluations and the certificates of completion, and we'll just walk through that process at the end. And then if anybody's working on any projects and they would like to share what they've been working on, we'll go a final run through of anybody's projects out there, okay? All right, that's the day. Talked about our helpers. We talked about our 4 sacred elements, yet Mary's adding grandchildren, daughter, their dog, and God. Yes, definitely very helpful. We've talked all along about utilizing our elements. I hope y'all have a little water with you. I should take a drink too. As you can see, I'm in a hotel. So I'm drinking coffee out of an old hotel coffee out of a paper cup. It's not very good coffee. I'm spoiled by my home brew coffee. All right. So one last revisiting about thinking about the characteristics of white supremacy culture. In our advocacy, we're going to be standing in biased support of the survivors, and we're going to have to interrupt a lot of the barriers and institutional, the rigidity of our institutions, right? And that's a white supremacy culture being held up by our institutions, and our role as an advocate, whether we're a formal advocate or not, is going to be to interrupt those institutional practices that are not helpful, right? Even the fact that I feel like I have to be quiet in my hotel room, right? That's like, why would I have to be quiet? And there's like social norms that we learn, right? And we have to be fearless and unafraid to interrupt a lot of those social norms that we have learned, right? We'll just talk a little bit more about these as we go. We just talked about standing in biased support of survivors, meeting them where they're at. We had a staff call this morning. Our full staff checks in every morning. The first thing we do at 9 o'clock in the morning is we have a check-in call. So all the staff all across the country, we log in and we just say how we're doing for the day, right? And one of my coworkers said in a place that they worked, there would be, so it was a shelter environment, and one of the women who were in the shelter didn't know how to cook. They were heating up something in the microwave. And so my coworker was saying, rather than saying, don't you know how to cook? Or, you have 4 kids, how come you don't know how to cook, right? But saying, hey, we should have a set aside some time where we can all cook together, right? So rather than shaming the person out, because who knows what kind of violence that they were living in or experiencing, why they didn't have the skills to cook a meal. We don't ever know the answer to that. But by doing it in a non-shaming way and providing an entry point or a safe place to learn, that's what our role is as an advocate. And I just thought that was such a perfect and profound and beautiful story of the ways that the power that we have to interrupt things in a good way, right? So that was a really good story. And that's what we do. We meet folks where they're at because we never know how it got to be that way, right? Standing outside the systems, removing those barriers, always carrying their stories, you know, the lived experiences of people who have experienced sexual assault. Their stories are sacred, and we're going to be carrying those forward, right? And treating them as sacred stories, and also not letting their experiences become invisibilized or that they don't matter. Like, how are we going to impact the change that is needed so the folks coming after don't have to experience those same barriers or those same harmful practices, right? Thinking about how we actually end sexual violence, not just interrupt once the violence has happened, right? So what is advocacy? You know, what we kind of have a general idea, you know, a lot of us in this room are already doing advocacy in a formal way. And then also we're doing advocacy, maybe not even in like a paid position or in a formal practice, but our advocacy shows up all different kinds of ways all over the place with, you know, our kids at school, with somebody doing something crazy in the grocery store. Our advocacy can show up all different kinds of ways, being good relatives to one another, right? And so the expertise in this room, if you think of something that would be helpful, you know, jump in and share it, type it in the chat, or, you know, jump on the microphone, say your name so the interpreters know who is talking, right? And just share the pieces of information you think would be useful, or if you have questions, jump in and share, okay? So the goal is just to be an introduction into the core skills of advocacy. And if you remember on the very first day, I was talking about that 6 core skills, and that was kind of like a body of work created by survivors and advocates, hundreds of them. They got together and they said, what are the main components of what advocacy looks like, right? And they kind of just mapped it out a little bit to give us like a little map or a little graphic, just to kind of help frame things up. So not that it's the only way or the way, but it is just a little bit of a path to help us walk through it, right? So what are the 6 core skills of advocacy? You know, I do a little practicing in like what the core skills are, and then be thinking about our beliefs and principles of advocacy too. Okay. So one of the things that we want to be clear on in the front end. So, you know, I was saying that some of us are already advocates. We're in a paid position doing advocacy in a program, right? And some of us are working in other areas, or maybe we're not working in a program at all, right? Maybe we're in the community helping people just in our everyday lives, and that is advocacy. So we want to make a distinction here that, let me see how to word this. So when you are an advocate in a program, housed in a program, and you usually have, you know, a supervisor and a path, right? You have an intake, you have a conversation, you sit down and work with somebody, and you have a very particular way to do it, right? And then sometimes in community, our advocacy is the same principle, but we are not having to fill out an intake form, or we're not having to do the things that happen inside of an organization or a program, right? So what we want to say here is that if you're not working in a direct service agency or organization, you can still do good advocacy, stellar advocacy, actually, meeting the victim where they're at, accessing resources, helping them navigate all the systems. You can still do that, but we also encourage you to connect with your local advocate program, right? Because once it gets into the sort of more formalities, the more legalities, you know, that's going to be something that being in it, connecting with somebody in an organization is going to be really helpful. Okay. If there's, you know, when we're not working in a program to fill out an order for protection, that looks a little bit different for just a citizen in the world and then somebody who's an advocate in a program. Does that make sense? And we don't ever want to put anybody in danger or weaken the process when it comes to reporting to law enforcement, getting the investigation going, the witnesses, the statements, getting the forensic exam. Like those are real important processes in the whole machine, right? So we can still be good advocates, and we want you to connect with the advocate program. Does that make sense? Okay. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that. No? Okay. Okay. So the formal role of an advocate, right? You're going to be setting that tone of safety and support and helpfulness, you know, being aware of the tone in our voice, right? Acknowledging that harm, making sure that you're working towards safety and what the immediate needs are. When the victim or survivor expresses a need, we do our best to meet that. And so it may not be in order or the highest priority that we think, but we want to follow their lead. They are the experts in their own lives and the experts in their own experiences. And it can be a both and. Like they may not know what resources or possibilities are available to them, and we can offer that. And that they are experts in their own lives, right? So we want to really always be thinking about, you know, not saying you should, you know, this is something you should do. So why would we not use the words you should? What's a reason we wouldn't use you should? You can type it in the chat or say your name and jump on the microphone. It's opinion. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, this is Annette.
Hi, Annette.
I think not using you should is kind of like making the choice for them or telling them what they should do over what they want to do.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's like saying, making the choice for them. Yet Leslie saying, then it's about us and not centering them. Sheila said, we're here to empower, not tell them what to do. Deanna said, it's better to present options rather than tell a client what they should do. And Mary, yes, that continued power and control. So they're probably, you know, if you're coming out of violence, you probably had people controlling what you do or don't do for some time. And our role as an advocate is to really empower them to make their own decisions. So sometimes we're rookies at it. I was very much a rookie. I didn't know how to make decisions for myself when I was first coming out of my violence. So I needed a little coaching, right? I needed a chance to figure out that I could make my own decisions. And also it establishes that power differential, right? So it's continued power and control, what Mary's talking about. It's that I am the advocate and I have more information and know better about your life than you do. And so just the word you should has so much power. And when we remove that from our language, our vocabulary, it really enforces that the person is the expert in their own lives, right? And this is something that could be used in every area of our life as well, not just in advocacy. I mean, I do it to my little sister sometimes, right? Like, oh, well, you should da 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 da. It's with the best of intentions, right? But it's still creating a power differential that because I'm the big sister, I may know more and that she should listen to me. That's just not true, right? Even though as the big sister, I always kind of feel that way, but I have to check that, right? So it can be easy to do, but it's also easy to interrupt it once you think about it. The power of putting the power back in their hands. is everything, right? Okay. We also provide an accurate and thorough information on their options, and they could be, there's so many pathways that they may take. And so when you're just getting to know somebody and hearing, you know, what they have to say or what they ask for, you know, we can provide some options, some pathways, right? And then just to be able to explain a little bit about what to expect, right? If somebody wants to report to the police, what does that mean? What's going to happen? If somebody wants to go do the forensic exam, what does that mean? What's going to happen? Why is it important? What would happen if you don't, right? What would happen if you don't report to the police? What if you need some resources and you're not really sure if you're going to get in trouble for whatever reason, right? And so you can talk about that stuff ahead of time so that they can make an informed decision, right? And we talked earlier about, you know, making sure that when you're connecting and talking to them, making sure you let them know that you're a mandated reporter, right? So the things that they tell you, you know, they need to know ahead of time when you're first getting to know them that as a mandated reporter, if they tell you something and you hear that there's been harm to a child, that they're going to harm themselves or harm somebody else, you would have to report that. So that's like an example of when you give that information freely and they can make a decision, that's putting the power back in their own hands too. And it's about establishing that trust, you know, so they can make that informed decision. So responding to the immediate crisis is one component, right? But also in Indian country, I mean, I have many years and many instances and many harm doers in my life across my lifetime. So our advocacy will often not be just about the one instance of violence, that immediate crisis. So it's a both and a lot of times for us in Indian country. Our advocacy may be for that right now incident and also many layers in our community, in our family, in our being as Native people. And so, you know, if you are not familiar with some of those layers that we experience, it's a good idea to get to know somebody who can help you understand those layers better, right? Because it can be really unfamiliar to think about how there is I don't know what you would call it, but an expectation in mainstream culture that if you just pick yourself up by your bootstraps, if you just do your healing work and figure things out, you're going to be okay. And while that's, you know, somewhat true, there's a lot of different factors of why picking ourselves up by our bootstraps isn't the only answer, right? There's a lot of systemic oppression out there. There's racism, there's all of the, hold on, there's people coming into the room. There's lots of different things that are impacting. There's laws and institutions that make picking ourselves up by our bootstraps, it makes it difficult for us, right? So understanding some of those nuances can be really helpful in building that relationship, right? So some of those, remember I was telling you about the advocates and the survivors who got together in a room and said, what are the main things that made an advocate a really good advocate for you? And some of the 6 things that were identified is that to connect, right? So to feel like somebody is listening to you, hearing all the things that you're saying, but not pushing to hear all the gory details, just being open, transparent, clear, right? Honest, non-judgmental, just being, you know, being a human being ready to hear what the victim or survivor wants to share with you, right? And you still have to do, you know, all your forms and stuff like that. And there's some, you know, pretty oppressive forms out there, like that ask questions that probably don't need to be asked. And then there's some really good forms out there. So advocates have organized within their own programs to say, you know, is this question necessary? Why we're asking this question? And then part of it is like sometimes we as advocates may not understand why it's important to ask a particular question. But once you ask and get clarity, maybe you find that they're asking it because it's going to access additional layers of help for the person, right? But we won't know that until we ask, and so we have our own clear understanding of what those intake forms are, that kind of thing. Does that make sense? Okay. So, and then to understand where the person is coming from and where they want to go. You know, what is going to help them move towards healing and towards being a whole person? It's going to look different for everybody, right? Not everybody wants to report to the police and do the forensic exam and go into the courtroom and go in the criminal justice route. You know, sometimes somebody just wants somebody to see them and hear them and know they matter, right? Maybe they just want to be a part of the movement to end the violence. Who knows? Everybody's going to be different. So our role as an advocate is to find out what those, you know, to understand what are the things that they're going to make them a whole, healthy human being, right? Analyzing. So once you kind of have connected and you kind of understand, you know, what the overall picture is, then kind of take a look at that and then make up a strategy together, right? So the survivors, the expert in their own world, they know deep in their heart and in their spirit what they need. And so analyze and look at the situation and make some strategies, right? What does it look like to, if they want to move, right? What does it look like if they want to get to school, or who knows, any number of things that are going to be meaningful to them, we would follow their lead, right? And then that implementation. So really, what supports do they need to implement? And so it's not like opening a file on somebody and making a work plan. It's not that rigid, right? This is really about that human to human relationship and hearing what it is that they really want and working towards that, right? And, you know, we talked earlier in one of the modules about confidentiality and about documentation. So we're making sure we're documenting as little as possible, but just enough where we can see the flow of where they're trying to go with their life, right? Does that make sense? Okay. And then, you know, once you've got some plans going and you're starting to put some things in motion, if you find that things are not working, circle back, you know, say, is this working? Isn't it? And circle back and figure out another way, right? Because sometimes the things that we need to do are not easy. You know, Linda tells a story about somebody that she was working with who, when they came in, they wanted new tires on their vehicle. And, you know, if a program may think, well, gee, this person experienced sexual assault, how does wanting new tires on your vehicle, how does that relate to experiencing sexual assault? But it's not up for us to determine what is meaningful or what isn't in relationship to somebody's sexual assault, right? Because if this person just wants to be able to get to work or get to school or, you know, get to all the appointments that they need to do, they need tires on their vehicle. So the advocate's role is to figure out how to get this person tires on their vehicle. But if you don't have money in your program to go ahead and buy those tires, you know, we would not say, well, sorry, we don't have money to buy tires, right? Our role as an advocate is to be creative about what it looks like to figure that out. And yeah, no worries, Sylvana, no worries. And so what Linda ended up doing was, what they did have money for in their program was to help with groceries. So they worked it out where they could help the woman with her groceries, and in that way she would have money to buy her tires because the program was able to help with groceries, right? So sometimes it's the long way around, and it's too bad that it has to be the long way around to help folks, but sometimes we do have to be creative when we're, you know, still trying to follow the rules of our program or organization, but we still want to do good advocacy and be creative in those workaround solutions, right? Or it's a good idea. I think somebody mentioned a while ago that they had a list of people on their desk or like in their office. So people who, you know, they had a list of who is the locksmith, who is the different people that we can reach out to help. Like, is there a church group that would be willing to help with different things that, you know, normally are funded programs, they won't do that, but maybe a church group would be able to help with that. There's all different kinds of ways. There's lots of groups out there that if we're building relationships and they are understanding what we're trying to do, they'll be willing to help us out and be creative with that. Okay. So yeah, we just kind of talked about connecting. So, you know, building that relationship with survivors, connecting them to their supportive networks, right? So one of the main things about experiencing violence is that it's so isolating, right? It can feel so, nobody's going to understand what I'm going through. They're not going to understand how bad this hurts, how angry I am, all the things that kind of come with experiencing violence, right? And one of the strongest things that we can do is help them to understand that they're not alone, that there is a community of people that will be there to support them, and that there's a group of people who understand the dynamics of sexual violence, right? Understand the tactics that are used, understand the way that we're targeted for specific things, right? For specific reasons. So to not have to explain that is half the battle, right? It can feel so, I don't know, it feels, I don't know how to word it, like a relief, a sense of safety, a sense of like, oh, I don't have to explain every single thing to this person. They get it, right? That is so powerful to be that person for somebody to not have to explain every single thing. And, you know, only the survivor knows how much they want or need to share, right? And so as an advocate, you don't need to know all the details, but it just to have a basic understanding and what they need to share with you, they will share, right? That compassion, right? The opportunity to share their experiences with somebody they can trust, right? Access to accurate knowledge about sexual violence and the dynamics of it, and then possible actions to take or possible outcomes, right? The pros and cons, just explore what some options are. Sometimes we don't know that a sexual assault is even a crime. It can be, or, you know, that's why we kind of talk a lot about the definitions of sexual assault, because a lot of times we may not even know that a crime has been committed against us. It you know, especially for younger folks, they may not even know that it was a sexual assault. So the more that we can provide that option, that learning option moments, those are going to be really powerful too. So what if you were, normally we would talk about this like in smaller groups, but what if you're talking to somebody and they say, please don't tell anyone, please don't tell anyone. What can you say to them when you're connecting with them? You can type it in the chat or jump on the microphone, say your name first so we know who's talking. What if a victim says, please don't tell anyone? What can you say to them? There's no right or wrong, just what could you say to them? Becky said, unless it's something I'm mandated to report, our conversation is confidential. Yep. What else? What else could you say to when you're connecting with a victim that says, please don't tell anyone? I'm a safe person. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is Stephanie Pospisil, and usually I start that conversation with, I don't expect to tell anyone. But there are certain things where I am a mandatory reporter. So if there's child abuse or neglect, if there's, expressions of harm of themselves or someone else, or I explain our tribal court process, and if they're going to be going through tribal court for anything, or even our, state court system. But I usually start it with, I don't expect to tell anyone, and I expect everything to stay confidential. And I also follow that up with, if I have to say something, I'm not going to hide that from you. I'm going to let you know that, you know, I I really feel like there's some other people that could help you out, and I really want to be able to share that with them. But I'm not going to hide it. I'm going to be upfront with them, because I'm going to be there. If it was a child abuse or neglect situation, I'm going to be right there with them, helping them through that system as well. So there's no sense in me making a report and then sitting there acting like I don't know how anyone else learned about it.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Stephanie. Yeah, so what Stephanie's talking about is really helping to support that person to take action in their own life, right? So being clear ahead of time that you're a mandated reporter and these are the reasons why, but also, if there is children being harmed, the survivor doesn't want that child to be harmed, right? So, but they may not know what to do or how to do it and don't want to lose their kids or have continued harm. So Stephanie's talking about, having that person be a part of the process, be a part of the solutions. And that's really empowering. And it takes a minute sometimes to feel like you have any power. So as an advocate, we can really support that movement or that growth, right? Sit down and make the call together. Yeah, that's really good. Okay, and then there's some other comments. Everything you say stays between us, and this is your story to tell, not mine. I'm a safe person for you to talk to. This is a safe place. Marion said, reassure the victim that you believe them. They're in a safe place. Daniel said, before they start talking, I will say, you can tell me, but if there's someone who I think could help you, we can talk to them together. Yes, it's awesome. Awesome. Miigwech for that. Okay, how about this? What if a survivor says, you probably won't believe me either. When I told my cousin, all she said was, well, I told you not to go to that party. What can you say to this person who says, you probably won't believe me either? What could you say? Isaac said, I believe you no matter what. What about when they say, my cousin said, I told you not to go to that party? What can we say to that? I believe you, your safety matters, that it wasn't their fault and that they didn't deserve what happened. It's not your fault.
Yeah, this is Isaac. I just another thing, maybe if they're that when they say, when I told my cousin, all she said was, well, I told you not to go to that party. You could say, well, did that happen to the rest of the people at the party? No. So going to the party was not the reason that it happened. Somebody acted from a really evil place, and that is entirely on them. Nothing is on you. None of that blame is on you.
Thank you so much for that, Isaac. So that, what Isaac's speaking to is a lot of times our self-blame, our rationalization, we'll try to rationalize and own it ourselves as a survivor. And so, one of the core skills of advocacy is to interrupt that self-blame and to put the blame on the harm doer every time. Whether I'm drinking or not, or partying or not, or whether my clothes look a certain way or not, it doesn't matter. It's not an invitation for a sexual assault. So to affirm that as many times as needed, sometimes for an entire lifetime, we have to affirm that it's the harm doer's fault, right? They made a choice. That's awesome. Okay. I have no reason not to believe you, and you have a right to go somewhere without being hurt. You're not responsible for the decisions, choices of others. It doesn't matter what or where it happened. You did not deserve the abuse or violence that occurred. I believe you. I am here for you. You have the right to safety and autonomy, regardless of where you are. Parties are supposed to be fun, and this is not your fault. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, what about this? If you're talking to somebody and they tell you they don't want to go to school tomorrow, I'm not sure if I can handle this. What are some things you can say? I don't want to go to school tomorrow. I'm not sure if I can handle this. Tricia said, what might help you feel safe if you were to go to school tomorrow? Okay.
Christine, this is Becky.
Mhm.
I think too, just validating that there's nothing that says you have to go on like nothing happened, right? Like if you need to take some time, if you need, whatever that is, I think just kind of reiterating, like asking some questions around that, like what are their options? Do they have, just those kinds of questions, like for some people, it might be easy, they might just want to stay in a normal routine. For others, they may need to take some time or go somewhere else to stay for a while or whatever they need to be safe.
Mhm. Thank you, Becky. What else? What else could we say to this person? They don't want to go to school. Leslie said, I had offered to help communicate with the school so they don't have to share what happened. Awesome. Just support their decision. Yeah, Ashley's saying, well, what worries you about going, right? So those exploratory questions, like those open-ended questions, can help us. So when our bodies and our brains and our spirits experience violence, you can hit like a wall, right? And it can just shut you down so hard, right? And so part of our role as an advocate is those exploratory questions to kind of get at, well, what are the barriers for me to kind of navigate through this? And so even to ask, well, what worries you about going? And to have somebody ask that question makes me, well, what am I worried about going? Why am I worried about going? Are people going to see it, that it happened to me? Am I just like, I can't concentrate because, all the things, it could be any number of things, but by an advocate asking the question, it helps explore it and brings it out, right? I think it can be really healing to just kind of process it through, and just to hear it and say it out loud releases it to some degree, right? Communicating with the school if they would like, asking to push back exams, et cetera, or make it so they can focus on their healing. Can we just get your homework? Can we pick up your homework? So, if you're interested in doing that, right? Because what Becky was saying, that some people need that structure. They need to get right back into their daily lives and their routine because that's going to help them get through it. And sometimes not. We've got to back all the way out, right? So what does it look like to back in and out? And how can we support them in our advocacy? Elias said, you've been through a lot and you can absolutely take a break as much as you need to heal. And how can we communicate what's going on with the school so you don't get punished for taking care of yourself? Yep. Yep. Awesome. Thank you. Also, there might be some mandatory reporting stuff in there. If this person is still school age, making sure that we're being clear up front that you're that mandatory reporter. That's also something to remember with this. Okay. Okay. So that understanding piece, I guess we've been talking about this, right? Recognizing and knowing the nature of violence. Well, it's not just women, right? The nature of violence, the nature of the intersections of oppression, right? Colonialism, all that stuff. Identifying how it appears in our lives, right? The lives of survivors individually and collectively. Understanding the needs and the problems that it creates. We're talking about those multiple intersections, right? So we may not even know ourselves how many layers of oppression that we are under, because nobody has taught us this stuff, right? We could probably list a million different things that have an impact on our lives, right? Where we live. We were just talking about this morning, financial literacy. If nobody has taught us how to open up an electricity, get electricity at our house, what process does it take to do that? Back in the day, it used to be we wrote checks. Now we just have an ATM card, but there's still a process to go to the bank, and you have to have a certain amount of money in your bank for you to even get like a ATM card, right? Like there's a process to things. And sometimes we don't have access to that information. If we live super rural, or, on the res where, you have a PO box, I mean, all the different things, right? So there's sometimes like so many layers of oppression that we don't even know it, right? And to identify that and name that and explore that and understand that is going to go a long way in our advocacy, right? What are those layers of oppression and those intersecting needs, right? And looking into that can I think what I'm trying to get at here is that we're more than just our sexual assault. We're whole beings that we still got to eat. We still got to like pay our bills and feed our kids, and like our lives are going on. Just because we've been sexually assaulted doesn't mean the whole world stops, right? And so our advocacy must reflect that life is still moving, whether that sexual assault has happened or not. And so how can we slow things down and get things handled and get the power back in the survivor's hands, right? Okay, developing new perspectives and insights. So kind of circling back to that student or that person who said, my cousin told me I shouldn't even go to that party anyway. So if that's the message that they're getting from the people in their lives, it can be a tremendous amount of shame and guilt and confusion. I'm just a person trying to have a good time here. And then people are confirming for me that there's something wrong with me and that I made choices that caused this harm, right? So to have that new perspective and have somebody affirm that not everybody got sexually assaulted at that party that night. So, let's put the blame where it lies, on the person who did it, right? I mean, that's an insight that you just kind of like can have a light bulb moment at that time, right? And anytime we can do that is helpful, to know that we're not alone in it, and to know that there are many tactics at play here, right? That we're targeted just for being Native, just for being Two-Spirit, just for being brown. I mean, all the ways that for being female, for having all the different ways that we're targeted, right? So those perspectives help to know. And if you never heard about it before, it can be a lot of things happening in your mind trying to figure things out, right? So some questions to, help to understand, what's going on with the person and what they want. Like, this is not something that I would say personally, like describe to me. But, there's things that I might say, tell me more about, or help me to understand, or why do you think? Are there a couple other questions that we could add to this list that might help you to understand when you're working with a survivor? What are some helpful questions that we could use? Okay, Aaliyah said, are you comfortable sharing more about ... with me? Yeah. Or I'm wondering if. What else? What are some other questions that might be ways to help you understand? Trisha said, sometimes silence helps someone know that they can keep sharing. So part of it is interrupting. That's a habit of white supremacy that we feel like we have to fill every moment with words or something. And for us to be patient while we're processing information. So some of us are real quick thinkers, right? We know the answer, we kind of got it. We just need somebody to help us navigate a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But others need time to process and work through it internally. And also it's a trust building. So we're also, as victims or survivors, we're reading the room, we're looking at eye contact, we're looking at body language, we're looking at tone of voice, we're looking at what's on the wall, we're looking at when I walked into this building, what was it like? What does it smell like? Is it too hot or too cold in here, right? Like our senses are like on fire. Sometimes we're completely shut down after an assault, but a lot of times we're super tuned in to everything that's happening around us, right? And so it's okay if that person is sitting quietly or talking about things that don't seem to be related to the sexual assault, right? Like part of this is that they're trying to get a feel for how this is going to go. So you can be asking questions, trying to understand, but then sometimes you might have to just offer up a couple of options and say, well, these are the things that might happen, or these are the things that you might be able to do, right? Like, and I'm just using these poorly worded examples of offering some of the options, right? Because a lot of times we don't know what is available to us, what resources are possible and available to us. So naming a couple of those and just being like, well, what do you think about that? You know, because then it gives them a chance to be like, well, what do I think about reporting to the police? Or what do I think about going to do the forensic exam, right? And so if you name kind of like what the process looks like and how it might be, and why it's important, it might just help them to see if that's a step that they want to take or not. Right? So letting go of limitations, being, an equal, that they are expert in their own lives. They know things that you will never know and don't need to know, right? And how does all that fit together? What support system do they have in their personal life, in their family life, in their community? We may never know that, right? But asking could be helpful. Who do you have that's supportive in your family or in your community, right? And just having somebody ask me the question might help me think about it differently, right? Or to know that somebody's wondering about my support system, that could be everything too, right? So normally we would just do this in pairs, but I'm not going to do that to you. But the idea is that a lot of times when we're having a conversation with somebody, and this is pretty uniform information, but we'll spend a lot of time thinking about what our answers are going to be, right? When we're asking somebody else a question. And so our role as an advocate is really to listen and be fully present, right? And so if you have a form or intake form or a where you're documenting your notes or whatever it is, you know, making sure that you're communicating that, hey, I'm going to take a couple of notes here. And if you would like to see the notes, or just so you know what I'm writing down, those can all alleviate a lot of anxiety in a person. Because as you know, and I'm sure it's happened to you, you've gone someplace and all of a sudden they're writing on paper like this while you're talking, right? You're like, what the heck are they writing? And so relieve that anxiety in that moment and be transparent. That can be super comforting to the person that you're sitting there asking questions. Everybody has their own sort of demeanor or way that they ask questions, but you know, it's always helpful to do our best to explain the process, explain why, and also be open to feedback on it. Well, if you could just listen to me first, you know, and then write a few notes, or you know, sometimes they want you to write things down. And so, hey, can you write that down? It just depends. We would follow the lead of the survivor, right? Follow the lead of the survivor. What else? Yeah, listen, like listen without thinking about a solution, without thinking about your next question, without thinking about what the time limit is on this appointment, right? Because we're going to be in tune to that vibe, right? Okay. So that analyzing piece, you know, really thinking about like what course of action can we take? What are the possibilities here? It depends on what they say that they want to make happen. Because, you know, sometimes they're going to say, I want to kill them. They might, I mean, I've thought it. I've definitely thought it about my harm doers. I just want to freaking gone off the earth, right? And that is a valid feeling. And so, you know, we're not in the business of killing people in our advocacy, but we are in the business of validating that feeling, right? And so what does it look like to validate in a way that moves towards a solution and healing and being whole, right? And validating that feeling of just wanting them to be gone off the earth, right? And we can do that with our words, that affirmation and that validation, right? And then sometimes it's going to be more strategic and tactical in what things they want to do. Maybe they want to get signed up for school, or they want to finally apply for that job. Maybe they need housing. I mean, all the different things. There's a million different things we know outside of just like reporting to the police or doing the forensic exam. It's going to be all different kinds of things, right? Maybe it's getting signed up for SNAP and WIC. What does that look like? You know, maybe they're trying to get their kids back because they've been coping with other sexual assaults and they lost their kids. And maybe that's what's hurting them the most, is that they lost their kids. It may not even be the sexual assault that is that's likely the cause of the original suffering, but then all of the other things can be symptoms, right? And then to cope with that, we may be using all different kinds of coping mechanisms. So maybe we have to navigate that, right? All at the root of that healing, of that being whole, right? So exploring all the sources. And so that's, you know, sometimes we don't have the answers all by ourselves. So that's why it's a good idea for us to build relationships with the possible resources out there ahead of time, which is why we encourage you to go meet with your police department, go meet with your SANE nurses, the people who would do the forensic exam. You know, who are the prosecutors in your village or your town or city or whatever? Who are those people, right? Having those relationships built ahead of time gives you a faster response to the survivor in the moment, because you've already kind of done your homework ahead of time, right? Who's your mental health providers? Do they know how to work with Native folks, right? Do they understand that the trauma that we've experienced in our lives is like intergenerational, that it's not just me that who has experienced this, it's my mom, it's my grandma, right? It's like way back, right? And so somebody who understands that and doesn't need all of that explained, that can be super helpful. Know who those folks are, right? Strengthening that self-determination. What does that look like? Even ask them, you know, what do you need to feel like you have control over your own life, right? Or, you know, to be able to make decisions in your own life, what does that look like for you? Just try to process through and explore, right? Okay, we talked about this a little bit. So the pros and cons, or the risks and benefits, you know, there's, if you are going to report to the police and then have to go through the investigation process, there's some risks and benefits, or some pros and cons with doing that. You know, if you do go the criminal justice route and you do have to go get the forensic exam, that means that you know, that's why in this training, we go through the forensic exam, because it's helpful for us as advocates to understand how detailed that little cardboard box is, and how deep they're diving into your body and your life and your experiences by opening that box. So if we can talk through ahead of time, so the survivor can make an informed decision whether they're ready for that, or they know that you're going to be there every step of the way while they navigate it, that could be everything. That could be worth the you know, the invasiveness of it, right? So anytime we can share that information and that little pieces of knowledge are about that process, that just relieves our own, the unknown, the fear of the unknown, that anxiety about if it's the right thing or isn't. Just talk it through, right? Some helpful questions could be, well, what would happen if, you know, or, you know, what would be helpful if, and what about this, and what about that, right? Like following your instinct on, you know, what you think would help to get to what they really need and feel strongly about in their own life, right? So once you're working out that, you know, that course of action, that little plan, so not a work plan that's in your file kind of plan, but that sort of path that you can, that the survivor can see, right? That you're going to help shine a light on, to see, to make it easier, to remove any barriers, right? Like when I develop my own path, I'm more likely to take it. And if I have support and somebody shining a light on that path, that's just going to be easier for me to navigate the path that I have set for myself, right? So as advocates, we can really affirm that this is your path and your choice, and you get to say how fast we walk, how slow we walk, whether we stop and take a break, whether we sit down on this bench over here and just take a look, right? Like this is really kind of how it goes in real life, right? If it's not working, what are we going to do different, right? What kind of people do or systems do we need to involve to make sure that we're getting it right? Yeah, and another thing too, like why we through in this training why we talk about the responsibility of law enforcement and those investigators and the prosecutor and the forensic exam. Like, this is why we talk through that, each of those institutions, because the more we understand about what their expectations are going to be from their system, the stronger our advocacy can be, and the clearer understanding a survivor will have, right? Because it's such a big process sometimes to go into all of those systems. And so, you know, we want to have an informed decision whether we're going to engage in it or not, and know that we're going to be supported or not matters. Okay. So consciously do that immediate and ongoing advocacy work. You know, be fluid and flexible and fast and creative on what that looks like. Things don't very rarely go as planned. We probably all know this, that things rarely go as planned. And so being quick to adjust, right? And being present and knowing that they can trust you, be there, that matters, right? Okay, we talked about this already. Meeting with practitioners to make victims' reality visible, influence your existing documentation, right? So, you know, okay, let me see how to word this. So, you know, I'm gonna just try, like, I'll just use myself as an example. So if I have been sexually assaulted and I show up at a program to ask for advocacy, and maybe I'm really quiet, or I don't answer questions, maybe I seem kind of resistant, or I'm mad, you know, I can have like an external demonstration of we all know, we've all worked with different people that they show up a certain kind of way, right? And so our role as an advocate is to see behind the way that people present because of the violence that they have experienced. Does that make sense? We have power, a gatekeeping power in the information that we collect on a person that we're working with. The documentation, you know, we have certain rules within our organization, what we document, you know, for purposes of like our reporting, for purposes of accessing additional services. Like there's, you know, we have roles and responsibilities in our job. But making sure that and we've talked about this, like that we're not putting anything harmful in our documentation. Like, well, this person just seems mad all the time, or they don't even answer my questions, right? What we want to make sure that we're doing is we're having a full understanding of all the intersections that are probably collapsing on this person at that particular time, right? After experiencing a sexual assault, but also our generational experiences with violence as Native people. All of those things are going to come together and intersect when somebody's coming for accessing advocacy, right? So making sure we're being careful to not further victimize somebody by what we're writing down, but also when we have that understanding about those intersections, it can be more accurate in what we're trying to talk about in our documentation. I hope that makes sense. Oh my goodness. Okay, we've talked about this, you know, revising our course of action, you know, if things are just not working out, if, you know, and so, you know, if you're talking about a process that we have no control over, so, you know, we have a right to speedy proceedings if we were to go the criminal justice route. Now, speedy proceedings, according to us, looks, as a survivor, it looks very different than the institution, right? Speedy proceedings can take years, actually, for for the investigation to happen on both sides, right? They're investigating all the witnesses, all the details. They're looking for corroborating evidence, all the things that can take months or even years for it to go to court. For the trial to happen can take weeks. Like it's not speedy, right? And so that's not what we're talking about here. But you know, if we're going down a path that doesn't seem to be helpful or is not empowering the survivor, then we need to adjust. If it's causing more harm and being more stressful on their life, then we need to adjust. And what does it look like? What's a new course that we can take, right? A new course of action. Okay. So yeah, kind of talked about all these core skills. They don't always go in order. When you meet somebody, you don't always, you know, you don't always have to sit down and connect and try to understand the problem and analyze it and strategize and implement and reflect, right? It bounces around. It's based on the person. And because sometimes they know exactly what they want. They come in the door and be like, I need somebody to go with me to get the forensic exam. Boom, they know exactly what they want, right? And so our advocacy will reflect that. If they know and they want to go, we can still slow it down and make sure that they understand the risks and benefits of it. You know, you can still slow it down and explain things. But if they know what they want to do, then we just do it, right? Okay, there's a couple of scenarios here that we'll just try to talk through. Okay, so this is Betsy. Betsy is a 68-year-old woman with severe back pain. And Annie called when she found her mother covered in bruises and crying. Betsy said her husband came home drunk and beat and raped her. She's reluctant to talk to an advocate. So if we're connecting, you know, with Betsy and Annie, building that trust with them, what are some things that we can say? You can type it in the chat or say your name and jump on the mic. What are some things we can say to Betsy or maybe Annie? How could you connect with Betsy or Annie? Hello, hello. Anybody? Shayla? I see your face. How could we connect with Betsy or Annie? Okay. So Tricia said, would it help to ask more about either of them, not just the assault, but get them talking about anything? Yeah, maybe talk to Betsy about her back pain. Like, have you seen anybody for your back pain? Yeah. Assure them that we do not need to involve law enforcement. What they decide to share stays within the office. Yeah. Mariana said to Annie, I would share that the violence isn't her fault, and sometimes children can think it's because of their behavior. Mm-hmm. Andrea said she doesn't have to talk directly to an advocate, giving her daughter connection to the resources. No worries, Linnell. No worries. We're here. We've been waiting all this time for you. Hey, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. Yeah, so and Amanda added, don't talk with her like an advocate, talk with her like a peer. Yeah. Approach with curiosity and small talk before getting into heavier topics. Developing rapport can make all the difference. Yeah. So if, if Betsy is reluctant to talk to an advocate, part of it is like, you don't want to show up all in advocate mode, right? You show up as a good relative and prove that being a good relative, you're gonna be a good relative right now. And that advocacy piece will just come naturally as that trust is built, right? Food opens doors for human connection. Yes, Kayla, food is the magic connector, right? Awesome. All of those answers are exactly right. And sometimes, if Betsy is ready later for an advocate, or not, Annie, yeah, Betsy may or may not be ready for an advocate, even though she's the one that experienced the sexual assault. Sometimes that secondary survivor needs advocacy as well, because it can be really hard on a daughter when their mom is going through pain like that. So it's okay for both or either to have an advocate, right? Let them know it's okay to just spend time in silence if that's what they need, holding that space until they're ready. Yes. And it might not happen in that moment. It might be the next day, the next week, the next month, the next year. We will be there for them, right? Awesome. Okay, what about this? So if we're thinking about, trying to understand the core skill of understanding, and Geraldine, age 22, was raped by a serial rapist. The U.S. Attorney's Office contacts you in stating that Geraldine would like to talk with an advocate. She was told there is not enough evidence for the case to move forward, and Geraldine is angry. What are some ways that we can understand that situation? How could we gain some understanding here? Andrea said validate her anger, help with moving through the emotions, connecting emotions to activism. Connecting emotions with activism. You could probably tattoo that on me somewhere. I love that. Okay, acknowledge how difficult it was to say and that you're honored that they trusted you to talk about it. Yeah. What else could we do?
Hey there, this is Kayla Swayze. I wanted to maybe add that let her know that if this person is a serial rapist, well, her anger is absolutely valid and she deserves to feel exactly how she feels right now. There's a chance that this could help someone's case in the future or help someone's case in the past, and that we are not done right now. We are not done with your story. This does not define you. And there can still be justice even outside of the first bad answer that you get.
Yes. And then Isaac added, acknowledge that the systems are not built for survivors so much of the time and that you'll stand next to Geraldine no matter what. Yes. Excellent. Yeah, and maybe it could be helpful for you to talk with the U.S. attorney, right? Or to be in the room when Geraldine talks to the U.S. attorney. So part of it is that, we can feel so when somebody pumps the brakes on us and we're still ready to move forward and go the distance, and then the system lets us down, right? So it can be really powerful to model what it's like to challenge the system and be like, well, can you be clearer, like offer more information on why there's not enough evidence, right? Like just the act of asking for them to clarify can be really powerful, right? When so often we're just made to feel invisible and that what happened to us doesn't matter, to go that distance can be really empowering. So awesome, awesome, good answers. Okay, how about this one? We're thinking about analyzing a situation. Shelley is bringing her 14-year-old daughter, Maddie, in to talk with an advocate. So Maddie recently disclosed to her mother that she's been sexually abused by her stepdad for the past 2 years. Maddie says she thinks she did something wrong to make him do that. So if we're analyzing that situation, what are some ways that we can talk with Shelley and Maddie? We're trying to analyze that situation. Andrea said looking at support for both the mother and the daughter. Mhm. What are some other ways that we can analyze this situation? So these are real scenarios that we've asked for permission to add in here. So this really happens. Ask about the current living situation. Yes, yes, Trisha. So, is there still a possibility for danger? Is there still exposure to danger here? Right? What is the current living situation? Is he still in the home? Amanda added, reiterating who is at fault, having separate advocates for the mom and daughter for individualized support, follow up in contact, such as support groups and counseling. So yeah, so Shelley may need a different kind of advocacy than Maddie, right? The secondary victims are often, the impact, it's not one is more or less impact than the other, but they can be different, right? And they're still painful. So when somebody we love has experienced violence, it's extraordinarily painful. So, we may need advocacy to kind of navigate through that journey, and how can we best support, right? And so having a different separate advocate can allow them both to kind of process what they're going through on their own. Okay. Isaac added, asking Maddie, why do you believe that you did something wrong to make him do that? Right? So just asking the question. And so when the person's going to have to sit there and think through how to answer this question, it might be like a light bulb moment of, well, maybe I wasn't the one who did something wrong here, right? They do not deserve it, and changes are being made to the sexual assault culture we live in. Yes. That open dialogue about how survivors are blamed. Yes, 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 yes. Excellent. 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 All right. Any other things to add? I just want to circle back to, and I can't remember who asked it or said it, but to find out if the stepdad is in the home, like that's a mandatory reporting situation, right? Like if they're still in the home, they got to go. And what does that ongoing safety look like? Okay, how about this one? 6 months ago, Bev was raped and agreed to go through with the forensic medical exam, but chose not to press charges. The evidence has been preserved, and now, if possible, she would like to press charges. So what are some strategies that we can employ here to see if Bev can press the charges? What are some strategies we can do with Bev? So one, we don't have to press charges in order to do the forensic exam. Remember that. Okay. Okay, Trisha, Eddie, can we look into this together and find out what it will take to press the charges now? Yeah. Yeah. I think locating some legal services, potentially pro bono services, which there are many in the community to understand our next steps. Yes, Isaac. Sexual assault specific legal services. Yes, Isaac. And these questions don't have all the information that we would need, right? So part of it is just, these are just quick questions to do some exploration without having all the answers. So asking questions to kind of get at, like, how long ago was it? If this was a long time ago, has the statute of limitations passed, and then what? So our advocacy would look different if they did the forensic exam, but the statute of limitations has passed. And so to press charges, it may not go anywhere if the statute of limitations is passed, but our advocacy, we still can do good advocacy based on that new set of information, right? Okay. Let's see. Okay. So then, that implementation and that reflecting and adapting. So really making sure that we're circling back. Oh, and then Joanne said, explore with Bev what she feels she would need and want for emotional and moral support if she were to press charges. Yeah. Yeah. So if she were to move forward, and then not the pros and cons, but the risks and benefits of doing that. So sometimes we can even go in to press charges, and that can be super empowering in and of itself. And if we get pushback for whatever reason from the institutions, it still is empowering that we made that move to go in and press charges, right? These are places that we're having some autonomy and choice and power in our lives that can really change the trajectory of our entire journey, right? So even if things don't work out in some sort of cookie cutter perfect way, all the moves that we take are they're actions that we're taking for our own lives, and it matters, right? And it does matter in the long run. When you look back on the fullness of everything, those moments have mattered, right? Okay. So yeah, continuously question and review and revise our courses of action, right? Our shifting conditions, successes, failures, and of course those unintended consequences. Sometimes when we take a particular action, it can go badly and it can have unintended consequences, right? Or vice versa. Sometimes we didn't even know that this was possible, that this particular outcome was going to happen, because we just never thought it would happen, but guess what, it did, right? And so just be kind of quick on our feet about it, I suppose, would be a good way to put it. Okay. Yep, and we've talked about this, that we're not just our sexual assault, and we're not even our many generations of violence and oppression and colonialism that we have endured, right? We're whole beings that drink really bad hotel coffee, right? And that matters, right? To see our whole being. That's healing, to be able to do that, to be seen as a whole person, not just our sexual violence, right? And so some systems change, Isaac was kind of really getting at that. Like, we're living in a culture of violence, or some others were speaking to that too, that we're living in this culture of violence, and we have poor responses right now to victims of sexual assault, all the victim blaming, all the you know, the language that defense attorneys will use in the courtroom, right? Like the movies and the songs and all the ways that it shows up to blame the victim, right? So making sure that we're kind of addressing that culture within our own families and within our communities, being really vocal about it, that's going to model what it is to interrupt that attitude and behavior and culture around us, right? Standing outside the system, really making sure we're focusing on the harm doer, right? Even like so many times I've heard around like domestic violence, well, how come she stays? Right? Like how come they stay in the relationship? Why don't they just leave? And my question is always, well, how come he's doing it? Right? And so that's really where that's the level of cultural intervention is needed. Right? Because our first question is always, well, how come they stay? Or like for this young girl at the party, well, how come she even went to the party in the first place? Right? And the real question is, how come that person made a choice to sexually assault her? Right? Carrying our stories, we're always carrying the stories of survivors, changing that toxic attitude about sexual violence, about, you know, being a sexual being, right? Like we do and should be able to be full and sexual human beings without violence, right? And what do we need to do to change that? Lots of things that we've already talked about, right? All right. Oh my goodness. So does anybody have anything to add? Any questions or advocacy skills that they would like to share with others? All right. Well, let's take a break then. So we'll take a 15-minute break and we'll return at 10 minutes to the hour. And then Linda will join us for the final module of the training, the self-care module. Okay? All right, we'll see you all in 15 minutes then. Oh, pause this recording. There we go.
That is just fine. Hold on and we'll get this.
There we go. Okay.
So I did, as a part of my self-care, I just got back from running through downtown and on the freeways to do something in the office so I could come back. And in order to get myself a little bit back together here, I had to light some medicine and then be intentional about that. And those things do not just come to us naturally. We have to seek some kind of peace, but we might not even know. So thank you for getting us through that whole module in the first part of the day. And it's hard to believe, but it went by just like that again, you know, when we're just about done. So again, thank you for everything you do. And this is a part of it is taking care of other people, but also taking care of ourselves. And at the end of the day, taking care of each other. So there are some tips to avoid advocate burnout. And when I first started being an advocate, nobody talked to me about this was the potential ending for some folks, is that they would be overwhelmed. So it's really good to talk about. So one of the goals for this is to identify the nature of advocacy work and the impact that it can have on advocates. We want to be able to recognize the impact sexual assault has on our survivors, on our communities, and our advocates. Recognize some common reactions advocates have when they're working with sexual assault victims that may lead to or indicate advocate burnout. Also understand that employers have a role in preventing advocate burnout and identify some positive actions that can contribute to our self-care. So there is our interconnectedness, and in the center of it is us. You can see like the spider web, that everything that we're touching and everything we are in, our community, our city, our reservation, our county, our state, our country, our continent, our level of consciousness, the sky, the earth, the water, all of it is connected. And so when we realize that, it doesn't make us feel so much isolated in how we're thinking and how we're feeling. And the impact of sexual violence can take a toll. Remember, our goal is to be somewhat in the center of these spheres, including and reminding ourselves that each of us has a physical well-being, a mental well-being, a spiritual well-being, and an emotional well-being. Any one of these that we are in on any given day, they can be challenged. If I slam my hand in the car door, it physically might hurt, or I might have broke it, or I might have cut it open, but it takes a toll on my mental state about what happened and why it happened, and prevention or anger. I could cry because of the physical pain. And then the spiritual part, I might be questioning, why did that happen? Or is this a part? Am I supposed to be learning something? That's the way my mind works. But any one of these that are challenged can affect the other parts of who we are. And we know at the time of trauma, all of your senses, all of who you are is challenged. It isn't just one part of us, it's all the parts of us. The same with advocates who are listening to stories, going to hospitals, visiting with people at their homes, watching and listening to people cry and be upset. It affects all of us. So the nature of our advocacy work and the impact for survivors can be that when they appear or come in, or we get a phone call or a knock on the door, or the police are calling, or a family is calling us, that the person sometimes we're going to see and to be an advocate for can be traumatized and realizing that they are in crisis. But there's all different ways that people respond to that. There also can be the fear, or there can be real judgment from family or community. And there can be triggers or things that activate those feelings of anxiety, including different smells, different sounds. For me and my immediate family, back in the 90s, there used to be Barney the purple dinosaur. I love you, you love me, we're a happy family. When I hear that, other people hear it and it brings happy memories and really good things to their heart and mind. But when I hear it, I know that that was some of the background about what was used to manipulate a little tiny person and cause serious sexual violence to them. So when I hear that, it does not, that's one of the things that can happen. Also that the offender may not be held accountable. that happens more than what we think and what we would ever assume happened when somebody has the courage and the support to step forward, that sometimes people are not held accountable within the criminal justice system. And for survivors, that can feel like nothing happened to them and everything happened to the survivor. So not just, I haven't just seen the survivor struggle with that. I've seen the family struggle with it. And then in the community, there can be a struggle. And sometimes multiple other victims, multiple people come forward to talk about what happened. So maybe they were victimized too. The lack of results can contribute to a negative feeling and ongoing problems with kind of like the broken justice system that exists in many communities. Also ongoing impacts, like I just talked about. Sometimes we have somebody who has done the same behavior multiple times and has victimized or compromised people's safety or actually violated them. For advocates, there is a prolonged attention to the details of sexual assault, especially if you're sitting with somebody and they told you about what happened, and then you go into the hospital setting or to the sexual assault nurse examiners, and you're listening again as they're talking, and then maybe you're a part of the law enforcement interview where there can be other details that emerge, and that might get stuck in how we're thinking. It has for me. Also some compassion and empathy. Most advocates have like a direct line into the compassion zone and empathy. Some don't, but most of them do. And there can be a problem with separating that outside of my personal life where I live with my family, and then the people that I'm working with, including not just the survivors, but my coworkers. Also, lack of results can be extremely frustrating when you believe with your whole heart and your whole mind everything somebody is telling you, and then there is no prosecution, or there is an assault on top of it, or threats, and there might not be anything that comes back. It can feel like you are overwhelmed because this is probably the community you live in also. So the safety of other people is in the back of your mind and in your heart with your own family and with everybody you see around you when there is no justice, or what feels like no justice. Also, most advocates, if you are doing your job, you have had and walked face to face into resistance and anger from the people who misunderstand these crimes, but also for the people who are in denial about these crimes, or for walking face to face into the alleged or perpetrator's family or the people that support them. And they could, at an event, get up and grab the microphone and say a whole bunch of stuff about your program. And while advocates hear a lot of stories, we are not judges or juries, but we are supporters, and we are biased because of the high rates of violence that our people face. There can be a limited or lack of resources. Most advocates have paperwork and they know what is available where, not just in my community, but also in the border towns in my community around, near, maybe in towns 100 miles from me. I might know something that might be helpful, and I know how to make the connections. So we do want to be all interconnected with the other service providers, because we cannot do all of it by ourselves. triggers related to personal experiences. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes people, because of the wonderful way that we are designed and put together, there can be protective barriers between our memory and our experiences and how we're living now. But sometimes that veil or that covering goes away when we are listening to real similar experiences or things that have happened to somebody. It can affect us in ways we never ever thought. And it might, for programs that are listening, say if we went into, I used to go into a treatment facility. Sometimes I went into the high school or middle school and talked about sexual violence. And what can happen is people that are not listening as a student or as somebody in treatment, but service providers or teachers or staff or other community members can be triggered in remembering things that happened by listening to the presentations. So that's just something that can happen. So some of the psychological terms and reactions, you might hear people say compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, countertransference. Those are big words, and projections, burnout, ancestral connections. I'm not sure what that means. Christine or Becky, do you want to talk for a minute about that? Epigenetics and cellular changes. Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, I don't know all of the everything about it. I just have learned along the way that they're scientifically, they understand what we've always known, right? That the things that have happened, not just to me personally, but to my mom, to my dad, to my grandma and grandpa, right? To my great grandma and grandpa. So many generations that can change the physiology in your body, right? There's cellular changes that in how our chemicals respond to things that are happening. So it's not just what has happened to me. You know, when Danielle is talking in the chat about finding out about a child who experienced sexual assault that was playing with her daughter, right? That's so personal. And it's not just some stranger. It can be a stranger, but what it is it triggers something in us that is ancestral, built into our DNA. So that the trauma that we have experienced with all of the assimilation policies, the relocation, just the genocide, that is impactful. But we also have to remember that our gifts and our teachings and our interconnectedness and our it's like sentient beings, right? The trees and the stars and the water and the stones, they are also in our connections, our epigenetics, right? So it's a both, even though we focus on kind of some of the harder portions of it, we have to remember that our teachings, our dreams, our medicines, they're also in there too. So, okay. I don't know. That's what I have to say about it anyway.
This is Becky, and I love what you were just kind of ending on with that, Christine. Like, it's sometimes we focus on almost like the ways we're impacted negatively by some of these things. And I think the piece of this too is that while there are studies that are showing this is real and there can be, you know, these changes, studies also say that they are not irreversible, right? Like that the work that we do, the personal work that we do on ourselves and within our families and for the future generations, like that makes an impact, and that has impact also and has positive effects. And so just like the negative or the bad that happens, the good that happens is doing that same thing within our genetics or within our future generations. And so I just loved how you said all that. And I did post a link in the chat also, that's from the CDC, that's kind of the more technical terms, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, this is Christine. And also it's not just us, right? It's not just Native people. So they've done studies on the people, Holocaust survivors, you know, war-torn countries. So it's not just us. They're finally catching up to our indigenous ways of thinking, though, that we're all interconnected, and that's progress. Thanks.
Thank you both. I wanted to say that what was said to us was, I didn't want to think about the things and the experiences that my ancestors, you know, walked through in order to have us have life, but there was not just the traumas, there was also a deep strength and wisdom and courage and all of the things that helped them to survive many documented and undocumented tragedies and stories. So I think there is an ancestral connection to trauma and to strength. So that all helps us to survive. Some of the reactions in these terms can be fatigue, intrusive imagery. When you're listening to stories, the mind starts building a picture about those things. Also distressing emotions, somatic complaints with no obvious cause. I remember for several years having aches and pains throughout my body. And I thought I was developing some kind of a disease or something that was making my whole body hurt. Also, mine went into my teeth where I did, you know, other people had, you know, intestinal problems. And some people, most of the people I worked with had headaches, horrible headaches. So it can also taint how you feel about the world altogether. There can be a change in your worldview and other functional impairments that nothing looks good. I see nothing hopeful. I see nothing good happening. I worry about everything. These things can be a direct link to what we're listening to and what we have witnessed and what we may have experienced on top of it. So understanding, you know, how our body will respond, while the body itself can't tell the difference between an act of violence and the memory of it, that is really because we are designed to survive. But there are definitely chemicals that are released, including cortisol and adrenaline. I think things that are happening when trauma is happening. Survivors that are disclosing details may activate the body's response. And advocates can be affected with feelings of their heart pounding, muscles tensing up. Remember I talked about the digestive system having nausea or feeling like they can't catch their breath. Also, the sense of powerlessness that can come, and a fear of inability to escape. It can start to really affect the way you feel overall about life. So some of the warning signs is that some folks no longer laugh or have fun at work. They don't see anything humorous about anything. They can become easily annoyed by coworkers or even annoyed by survivors, that they're losing their sense of purpose and what we're doing. Remember I talked about the health ailments, the body aches and pains, and also feeling less and less excited or less fulfilled by work. also can become easily annoyed or overwhelmed by minor problems. Some people are more prone to gossip or talk behind coworkers' backs and cause that kind of interruption in our circle of work by saying things. Some people call it microaggressions. It sounds like I'm teasing, but I'm saying something that's a little bit true. And I'm saying something that really hurt somebody's feelings, but I try to minimize it or say, in our community, there was a saying for people who said anything about the way somebody was treating them or teasing them. And the way they would minimize it was they would say, oh, not that bad. You know, they would, no matter what happened, they would say something along those lines, or do it again, or you must like it when somebody got hurt, you know, and those are not comforting words, but we can bring those behaviors and those norms into our workplace. So also there can be the quality of work that will suffer, which inadvertently affects the people who trust us to do good advocacy. Also, there can be, like, most of us have federal money and we are responsible to do progress reports. So we have deadlines set up for us and we're coming up to that tomorrow. But if somebody is working in a burnout state, they might have problems meeting deadlines and doing things that need to be done. Also, sleep problems resulting in low energy, lack of creativity, or being innovative. You can tell there's a difference in how people may have been and how they are now. So some of our responsibilities as employers is we do want to work to decolonize our workspace and have open communication and policies. It would be really good to have people help co-create policies. And if you're underneath a tribal arm, or maybe you're in the judicial wing, or you are in the social service wing, there might be a blanket of policies that mandate how you are doing your work. But in addition to that, in our community, our advocacy program was considered an essential service. So we had to have another set of policies. And I don't like to think about it so much as policies, but really a way of being and a way of doing our work that is agreed upon in our work community, sharing the crisis line schedule, not one person ending up with the crisis line every week, but there are things we can do to make it feel like everybody has a little bit of ownership in what we're doing and a say, because at the end of the day, it's just us doing the work. We want to interrupt habits of scarcity or overproduction, meaning that there are people who will work every single day if they are allowed to do that. And we can't control anybody with that, but we really want to lead in the other direction of that. We want a better work-life balance so that we don't get sick. Also support and model self-care. I have to talk to myself because a lot of us do not know how to take care of ourselves really well. I have a night guard. Remember, I grind my teeth, and a lot of people that have a lot of stress do that. And then there's a clenching or a reflex. Well, you can break your teeth. So a part of my self-care is to use my night guard. Self-care can look like going for your physical examination. going in to the dentist for cleaning and exam, exercising, those types of things. But a lot of us don't know how to do that very well. So it takes practice. It's really good if your leadership shows you by doing it with you or walking alongside or encouraging you to do that. When I worked for the tribe, we had a half hour a day they would pay us to take care of our bodies, meaning we could go to the gym, which was free. We could go for a walk. They were willing to invest that time in us. Also, we want to support and model zero tolerance for gossip. If the director or the leadership is talking about people in the circle, people will hear. In the way that it was said to me is, if you're going to say it, just know that the winds will blow your words all over. And when they're blown all over, parts of what you said will be taken out and parts of what you said will be added. So by the time it gets out into community, it might not be what you said at all. So it is better to have a way. We all need people to talk to that aren't going to judge us and aren't going to hate somebody or dislike them because of something we've said. We need to know if we need help, somebody that we can safely vent to. Maybe that's when we get a counselor or somebody out of the community that we could do telehealth with, or somebody that can help us to sort it out. Because surprisingly, some of the things that feel like they're the big issue are just the cover to some underneath issues that are brewing, not in organizations or in places, but within myself. And that's always surprising, I think, when we start untangling what feels like a messy situation. It would be great to have check-ins on staff meeting agendas, meaning a place where you can talk about things that are going on, and not like you have to monopolize the whole day for an hour and a half. But if you need further, you should have people on staff, including your leadership, that can take time and listen to what's happening, or just a check-in. We do a check-in every day, and we want to talk about that medicine wheel. How are we doing physically? How are we doing mentally? What are some things, sometimes we don't even talk about the medicine wheel. We just talk about, what did I do last night? And it's not supposed to be work related. And it's a practice. We're practicing. We're also now started a meditation reading in the morning. So it starts our day in a good way. And does that mean we don't have problems? No, that does not mean that. That means that we are trying to create balance before we step in to the arena of work, which can be like stuff whizzing by your head and you're trying to get your things done. But also, we want to allow people to express their stress, grief, and frustration, and there shouldn't be judgment, or that's not the way I would handle it, or they're not doing it right, or they shouldn't be mad about that. It's not, what that means is we're not listening. When our mind pops open to say what we think about what they're saying, we are not listening, but we're in a place of judgment, not of support. But also, we want to create some time and space for debriefing after critical incidents or high stress times, that you have a place to exhale and it's safe for you to do that. If you've had a death, a suicide, or serious bodily injury that your office has been involved in as advocates, you do want to take some time and sit with staff and let them almost exhale and find the support within your circle in the office. Hopefully, want to work together through ouch moments, uncomfortable conversations, I don't think that as advocates, guess what? A lot of us have walked through and been abused. And just because we were, it means that we know about that. And sometimes some of us could be abusive because of our past history or because of, it could be childhood, it could be in our relationships, it could be lateral violence in our community at other workspaces. Um, but we should be able to talk about that and say it in a way that is not pointing fingers at anybody. We can only talk from our own perspective and what's happened. We want to be supportive of staff who have children at a lot of our MIWSAC events, including our conference and our membership meetings, and sometimes in our office with staff. People have brought their children because we understand that that is the biggest part of us in our heart, and it can be our children, our nieces and nephews, our grandchildren that might be in our care. But we want to be supportive, not angry because somebody has to take care of their children. We want to be supportive. Also encourage timely vacation, group activities, and encourage them to do some kind of self-care. You can write that stuff into your budgets, directors and staff. We should have a place to have time together where we're not working. We did equine therapy, I think it was last year, where we didn't work. We went out into a field with some horses. And then we had like a in-service and we ate together and we didn't work. We were doing other things and learning. And we have plans and hopes to do that again in a few short months. So remembering that advocacy is really not an entry level position. It is something that is, you can tell, and so can the people who come for services. If somebody is ready, we need a lot of information and we need somebody to walk side by side with us for some of this, if at all possible. So the idea is we don't want somebody to do any harm to already situations that are happening where people are seeking us to support them and help. It is critical that this position of advocate can change lives and systems. It's a big job and it's not a lot of support in the communities. People might admire you from afar, but they won't get up and support you in public because they think there is actually a fear that somebody is going to be mad if they stand up and support you. Some people will, like leadership or, different people in the community who know the good work you're doing. But don't be surprised by people you thought would be supportive and they don't want to be in public supporting you because of their own fear or because of their own pain with issues of violence. Also remembering a proper compensation package is necessary and should include adequate pay, insurance, and time off. Well, we didn't have any extra cool benefits for advocates. I understood and knew that the role we played was very hard. So I wrote it in our budget to pay for full coverage for their children or dependents. And the 3 different people I worked with were single parents, and that was like one less thing they had to worry about. Just that little piece. And of course, people got mad when finance or people found out that we had dependent coverage and were yelling about it. But I said, there is nobody besides us, the cops and the ambulance that's out at 2, 3, 4 in the morning or working on a Sunday or a holiday. So I'll just keep doing it until somebody makes me stop. And they didn't. I just kept writing it in. We should have a culture of support around taking time to care for ourselves. Not where there's guilt or somebody telling, well, now I got to do this because you're not going to be, we got to change our perspective a little bit about how we're working and know that it's not just my coworker, but inside that person is a spirit and a whole lifetime of experiences, good and bad, whatever that means. And they have the ability to provide great care. And we want to help that to bubble out of people, but it can't if they're burned out or overwhelmed. And it's all, we need to find stuff that works for us and doing our internal work. If there's healing you need, and unfortunately, probably all of us need that at different levels. And I'm always shocked because I thought I did so much healing work. And then when I go to ceremony or try something else, like we had a program we worked through for a year called Indigenous Tools for Living. And I was kind of like rolling my eyes and, oh my God, I got to go for a whole year. What the hell? I already did a lot of ceremony. I did a lot of therapy. I did a lot of work. And I was shocked at some of the stuff that came up while we were unpacking what made me me and what made me behave and act and live the way I want to live. And so we all have work. We're all a work in progress. We might know a whole bunch, but on the scale of knowing things, that might be this much and there's this much to know. So, there's always room for us to grow and never want to forget or think we know everything about any one subject. We can know some things. So some of the self-care tips would be to start is just set some smaller attainable goals. For some people, it sounds silly, but just as simple as I'm going to floss my teeth, because that's a part of taking care of me. I'm going to go for a walk after work, or I'm going to go play with my children at the playground. I'm going to go swimming. Little things that you can say, my God, I did it. Because if you get in the pattern of not taking care of yourself, that can be a very big challenge to undo that way of thinking. We want to revisit our timelines for both long and short-term goals, rethinking deadlines that we want to pre-plan ahead. I don't like being in the last day before everything's due, and we're scrambling to get information. So maybe we did it again this time, but guess what? When our reports are due again in July, I want to start working on them in June. I don't want to start, working towards the end of July to get all my stuff in, or December and January. There's things you can do and tools you can use that were developed by the Violence Against Women Office and our technical assistance folks that can help us to be better organized. Becky on this call is our staff person who does communication and design. And she has her persistence and her ability to keep us on focus, her and other staff people can really help us so we don't do this and we divert how we've been functioning. Christine has things down, she sets us up for success. So like anybody could step in and do these things, but it doesn't have to be the crisis that we try to live in. It shouldn't be, it's not good for us. And we know that. So we need to be ready to kind of accept change and listen instead of saying, no, that's never going to work. So it's just having that, well, let's talk about that. Yeah, let's try it. You also, I have said this to people and I mean it, that sometimes what's going on with you personally is not, you don't want everybody to know, not because of shame or embarrassment, but because it's not their business. but you can't get the support unless you talk to a trusted supervisor or the director about what's happening. And then they can support you. There's things that they can do that can make this time in your life easier. If you have that kind of person that wants to be supportive. And sometimes we don't get a choice on who's hired to be our director. So we want to be that and be the support for our coworkers too. We need to build in some fun with music, jokes, scheduling lunch together, sometimes appreciation gifts, talking circles. Those things can make it better. When we did check-in, one time our director said, I don't want you to talk at our check-in. I want us to write our check-in in a picture. I want you to check in with a drawing. And I was like, what? So I had to draw something, and it wasn't a masterpiece or anything, but I knew what I was saying in my picture. And so I turned my picture, instead of me talking, people could see my picture. And then, but guess what's going on? You're using the left side of your brain, opposed to being analytical and writing everything or talking everything out. You are having to be creative. And that is powerful. Christine has asked us, we have done as a staff Tai Chi together, where we watch a less than 5-minute video, and just being in space with yourself and your body. You don't have to be on camera doing it, but doing these things breaks up what has become normalized for us, which could be very unhealthy. We also have had where you just, shaking. We had a portion where we did exercises. Everybody had to take a turn and lead in a stretch. So we've had dress up days at work where we had to dress up like rock stars for our check-in. We had I don't know, but all I remember what stuck in my head was there was a emphasis on Prince, the singer, for me. So those things didn't just happen. That's somebody coming forward and taking a risk and saying, well, let's try this, Anyway, change that routine up. The other thing is learn to say no. There was a time a couple years back where we did so many 40-hour trainings, and typically how we do these is not over a month's time. We would land in a community on like a Sunday, and we stay until Friday, and the 40-hour is done. It's intense and it's hard, but there was a year, I don't know, we did too many. And so Christine said, we'll never schedule that like that again. And what I did, I said, what did you say? And I took my phone and I audio recorded her saying that. We need to say no. We want to be able to do all of the things, but sometimes we need to say no. And many of us cannot say no very easily without feeling guilt or responsibility, which can come directly from past life experiences in our childhood. There can be some different things that make us think we have to do all of the things. So learn, and you have to practice. And during our training, I would make people practice saying no, I don't want to. That includes, I don't want to babysit. I don't want to give you a ride. I don't want to give you a cigarette. I don't want to give you my money. No, I don't want to let you stay here. No, I don't. People can't say that. And I am one of the biggest people that can't say no. Also, taking a walk and regular exercise, and that's a practice. We want to make sure that we're trying. You want to change the language, change the way you're thinking about things instead of seeing the problem. Start looking at the problem and looking for solutions. Don't just complain about things. Think about what's bothering you and come up with different scenarios on how that could be better. We want to change anything to do with hate to love or like. I want to change and get the word can't out of my vocabulary and use the word can. I don't ever want to call anybody stupid or dumb. I want to think of how they're inspiring me, or this project that I think is stupid is inspiring. It's just changing how you think. We want to set attainable goals each day with a checklist. Checklist can save your life. And if you got stuff you want to talk about Monday, but here we are and it's Thursday, flip through your planner and write it on Monday, because the chances are you're not going to remember on Monday. So 50 other things are going to pop up. We want to sincerely acknowledge accomplishments and compliment, people when you see them, or or recognize different things that they've done or how they are. Cultivate love for survivors and for community, to keep a clear vision of why you do this work. We want to have strategic planning with built-in time to play. I think strategic planning is difficult, but it is necessary. And our coalition would make us lock ourselves into what felt to me like a boarding school, but it was like a place where nuns stayed in the olden days, and we'd have to go there. And I was like, I don't want to go sit around in my pajamas with a bunch of people I don't really like. So I would be negative before I even got in my car, and I already had these barriers built up on it wasn't fair to them and it wasn't fair to me. So I had to change how I was thinking about it. And you do want to surround yourself with positive people and people who have good intentions and who have a good way of being, and if you don't have those currently, try to find some. I'm sure they're right around you. Also, the natural environment. Remember that water is cleansing and healing, and it refreshes our spirits. Invest in like a water container for your office. Also food. I learned so much. I came from North Dakota down here, and we have board of directors that are known not as board of directors, but circle keepers. And for circle keeper meetings, I was told like the week before, it's a potluck and you're gonna help, you're gonna cook something and bring it for everybody to eat. And I was like, okay. Well, when I walked in the back, we have health conscious people, and they had more salad varieties than I ever seen in my life. And I'm looking for like a hot dish, tater tots, wild rice, and it was salads everywhere. And everybody drinks water, tries to be healthy. So I want to try to do that too. Also, spending time with our relatives can be energizing. Yesterday was my dad's 85th birthday, and I got up super early so I could go to his house, because I'm also busy for work because it's progress reporting time. And I made time to be with him and to do some shopping or go out to eat, just things that help me to feel like I did do it intentionally with love in my heart for my dad. So also humor and laughter, and Native people have the coolest sense of humor. We can find stuff to laugh about, and sometimes we can't even talk about why we're laughing. Anyway, meditation and solitude is also very healthy for us. I think fasting, a couple weeks ago, I had to come to the reality that my dad is aging, and there are some things that are different about him than I've ever seen. And I was so upset about it after I was around for a little tiny bit, that I was sick to my stomach and I did not eat the whole day, which is probably good for me. But I think for us, fasting and with intention is a way of doing a hard reset on everything in your body. And it can be very healthy for us. I felt different the next day. I felt better. Also music, singing, dancing, all of those things are expressions, and getting out what's here or in our body and our being and expressing it is very good for us. I went to Madeline Island last week and I only stayed a couple of days. I could have stayed the week, but we have a lot to do. So it was so peaceful there. It's so quiet right on the Great Lakes, on Lake Superior and what's known as the Apostle Islands. I took a ferry over there. But when I was leaving, the women walked me outside. And as I was walking to my vehicle to get on the ferry, they started singing the traveling song for me. And nobody's ever sang that for me. I was traveling. We've sang it together for each other, but I almost started crying. I was like, I'm going home, but you know that it's release of feelings. And that can include emotional pain, fear, and rage and anger. There can also be a grief and a loss on letting go and releasing those things. Carrying this stuff is too heavy. And almost everybody on here in some capacity is a healer. And you are helping and healing and loving the people. There is no more powerful medicine than love. And when it comes from here and it goes out of you and you have a main connection coming from an outside source, it's able to do it without causing you a lot of harm. But you must take care of yourself. You must. You're too valuable to all of us and to your people. Ceremonies, powerful things can happen because sometimes I like to think that when we're healing ourselves, we're healing our ancestors' pains, and we're also healing our children and our future. So we'll be better for sitting and sacrificing time in ceremony, however that looks. Go ahead. Christine.
Sorry, I'm sitting here eating a salted nut roll. But I was thinking about ceremony. So we might have a certain idea about what ceremony is or isn't. But I just want to add that ceremony can be like, you know, most of us have Kleenex around, right? Or tissue. So what's tissue made of? It's made out of like paper or made out of a tree, right? So it's an element from nature. Even a piece of Kleenex is an element from our earth, right? So a ceremony can be as simple as being intentional about asking this piece of Kleenex that came from the earth to just wipe off, right? Just wipe it off. And it can be just that few minutes of just like wiping it off physically. That's a ceremony, and it's healing to do that. And then take that Kleenex and put it someplace that it's ask that hurt or that anger or that grief or rage or confusion or whatever feeling it is to be taken someplace that can't hurt anybody else, right? So it doesn't have to be a 4-day fast or, you know, a 6-hour sweat lodge. It can be as simple as asking a Kleenex from the earth to help wash you off, right? Or being intentional about drinking water. That's a ceremony. Like kissing your babies, that can be a ceremony. Getting a hug from your mom, right? All ceremony. Okay, I just wanted to add that.
That's beautiful. I am a part of the, our Department of Corrections has a prison project, and there's a high rate of Native people incarcerated in any state where there's reservations. And our people that are incarcerated don't have access to the things we do, but spirit can get through and penetrate those big old walls and any type of bars that they're standing behind. And we went to talk about their experiences that happened before they went to prison. It was a series of questions, which now we have a presentation from that. But one of the things they do have access to is water. And they have a sweat, but nobody to run it or to pour the water. So they talk to the water. You can talk to the water and then drink it and thank it. Thank it for helping you. All of us need water. It's the first medicine, but also a lot of times you might not even have the words to say what is happening inside from what you have secondhand experienced or witnessed or what has happened. And even a tear is so powerful where there may not be the words. So it's all necessary and it's good, and it is a way of releasing. Many times and I think most of us on here have had to do things on our own where we had the gift of doing them before with other people. It's whatever you do to help yourself. It can be extremely powerful because a lot of our people, they don't have access to people to help them to know the different things that could be beneficial to their well-being. So whatever you can share is probably, it's not necessary for them to do it forever, but it's another part of you helping our people to heal and to grow. So we each have the 7 generations of lineage residing in our body, remembering that from both sides, there's 32 maternal ancestors and 32 paternal ancestors, 64 in each of us. That's what I was talking about with the water. We are made up of over 60% water, and babies even have more. In our bodies, water looks for unrestricted flow, and the body is a container of all that lives inside of it. Water comes in, the earth changes, and when you express your emotion, your body changes. When you've had a real hard cry, when something has happened, or I don't know, some people think it's a weakness to cry, but it's actually not. It's a way for you to take care of yourself. And psychology today said that when the tears are coming more from the left side, that it is more emotional pain, or this side is physical pain. So when I'm in physical pain, it is affecting my emotions. And when I am in emotional pain, it is physically affecting me. But the tears are a release. And when you cry, we breathe the air. We have to be intentional too sometimes about breathing, just to remind ourselves. You have to practice breathing exercises. That was a part of it too for us, was learning how to breathe deeply and intentionally. So we know that air changes water, and air gives life to fire and energy. It says breath is key. So a healthy mind has an easy breathe. A fearful mind has a controlled, sometimes labored breathing, overwhelmed. Like when you talk to somebody who's crying and trying to explain something, including children, they're just overwhelmed by whatever just happened. So they might not be able to catch their breath and get all of what happened out. But your breath is a direct reflection of your state of mind and body, and vice versa. We want to use our breath to quiet our mind and use our mind to slow down our breathing patterns, and it will relax your body. And it takes practice. There's lots of YouTube videos and different, it would be great for all of us to practice that in our community, even if the local radio did some public awareness or community education on the importance of breathing, and led people, because some people are stuck in the house. So it would be good to have some way to communicate. I don't recall this being in here. The pen, Christine,
I'm here.
back the reptile. Could you please lead us in this?
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure. Now that I've eaten my salted nut roll and I'm feeling deliciously happy because it's salt and sugar at the same time. Mwah. Okay, so everybody knows, probably everybody knows that when you pick up a baby or a kitten or something, you kind of start naturally, like it just happens, right? Like if you're holding a baby, all of a sudden you're going like this. It's in our DNA to do that, right? There's something about that, but also just our brain. What we know about our brain is that we have the two lobes, right? We have the frontal lobe, we have what's back here, I can't think of all of it, but your left brain, your right brain. So information is constantly moving back and forth through our brain. The job is to categorize it and put it where it's necessary. But sometimes when it comes to trauma or stress or not breathing, that information is not passing back and forth through your amygdala and your hippocampus and all the things that are processing, that reptilian brain, when you're just reacting from fight, flight, freeze, respond, gather, right? That's your brain fires in and like helps you respond. But sometimes that information can get stuck. And what we want to do is to be able to file it in the appropriate place, right? That's what the work is. But sometimes to help move that along or to ground ourselves, we can physically do it. So go ahead and just stand up. You don't have to be on camera or anything, but I'm just going to stand up and just come get your feet comfortably apart. Go ahead and just do it. I can't do it from because I can't see. Okay. So get your feet comfortably apart and take a breath, but like not from high up in your chest. Take it from down by your belly button. Let it out. And then just start rocking back and forth. Doesn't have to be big movements. You could even do it sitting down with your eyes closed or your eyes open somewhere on the horizon. But what you're doing is you're sending information back and forth through your brain. Okay, breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Relax your shoulders and your jaw. Even think about where's your tongue in your mouth. You're thinking about a thread, like a thread that goes all the way out through the top of your head, all the way down through your core, out your feet into the earth. No matter how many layers of floor and carpet and cement are between you and the earth is under there somewhere. Just rock back and forth and be thinking about that connection all the way from the Star Nation, all the way through you into the Stone Nation, right? And just settle in your body. And then take one more breath in. Let out your mouth. One more breath in. And let it out. And just shake it out. So how long did that take? Was that maybe like, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that? And it doesn't take long to just be in your body. And one of the things that we're super skilled at is being in our head and not our body. And sometimes we have to do that to cope with the information that we're processing. But to be intentional about being in your body and let your body do the work that it is designed to do, that helps us relax a little bit. You're getting like this thing saying, if you got to go into the courtroom, if you got to do a presentation, if it's your first time being an advocate for somebody, you might be super nervous, like, oh my gosh, am I going to get it right? Am I going to get it wrong? Am I going to mess this up? Is this person going to hate me? Right? All the things that we can do to ourselves in our brain, but being present in your spirit and in your body is just everything. And it's a chemical reaction that's happening when you can be fully present in your body in that moment. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much. So here is a self-care polling question. What is the question?
That's the next slide is kind of the question.
Okay,
What ways do you take care of your whole self?
so remember we talked about this medicine wheel and the different quadrants, but you want to think about in what ways do you take care of your whole self? And are you intentional, or are you aware of that? And then what areas need attention? Or where could you focus a little more where maybe you don't do anything intentionally? And then thinking about what habits can you interrupt that you have that might not be the best for you. And then thinking about what else would you need to restore or maintain your balance. I'm thinking this is a daily focus, and it has to be intentional. It's not just gonna happen. It's shifting the way we're thinking about life totally. And the world and the community is not set up for us to think about how we are. It's set up for us to run, and do as much as we can in a short amount of time and do the best we could do. And then with what's left of you, go home, I guess. So this is just really, you're going to have this PowerPoint. There is also online many resources on this medicine wheel approach to life. Let me see here. Do you have anything to add to this, Christine? Or Becky, or anybody?
This is Christine. I think I would just ask like what folks in the room, what has worked for you personally? Have you experienced things at your organization or program that have been helpful? Like just share the tips because it might be useful to somebody else.
I really like that. Yesterday I was watching Moana, and there's a part where the arrogant demigod is singing "You're Welcome" because of how wonderful he is. He's telling Moana to say you're welcome. And when my husband came home, he was watching me watch Moana, and he said, I had no idea you like this cartoon. There's real big stories, that are mixed in with legends. And so that happens to be a really, just to sit down and watch it and see what are people watching, and then how can I relate to any of this, or what do we enjoy? And it might be doing something you've never done, or something you wouldn't think you have done, or you would have done. Yeah, it's The Rock who's the demigod.
Oh man, Leslie is typing in the chat to stay away from the news and social media.
Yes.
I think that is a huge, because that inundation of negative energy or information just can be so overwhelming. To just give yourself a minute from that really does matter.
And I think in political situations, not reading too much in, we really had a lot of division, and a lot of bad feelings happening in community. And you can have, one of my children who's an adult, but he said watching the news and listening to the level of violence, we have a high rate of shootings in our communities. And so he said it depresses him or makes him sick, and he's filled with anxiety after watching and listening. It's not that you can be a turtle and, not act like you're a part of the world, but you have to be conscious of what you're witnessing and listening to on your downtime. And just, yeah. Christine talks about walking on the earth, with your feet, your bare feet, and making that connection between you and the earth can be very healing.
One of the things, Linda, about, that it's not just like the news and social media, but it's even the television shows that are out there. So we have to remember that our brain is hearing, our brain is responding to the information, but our brain is going to hear a piece of information, and our brain can't tell the difference whether it's something on TV or whether it's our own personal memory, or or whether it's because you're an advocate and you're hearing these stories every day, right? So your body is going to respond accordingly to protect itself. We're miracles. Our bodies are miracles, and it will do everything it can to self-preserve. So if you're watching, these violent shows, it can be triggering and you don't even know it's happening. You could be releasing cortisol and adrenaline into your body without even knowing it, just by watching the shows. And they're banking on that. There's, social media people, they hire people to formulate the algorithms to go deeper down your brainstem, right? They're trying to get you to stay online more often so they can sell you more stuff. TV shows are just like that. Pornography is just like that. They're going deeper down the brainstem because you're responding from a place of your original reptilian brain, not with your thinking, this is 2022 brain, right? So just be conscious of that. And if you're conscious of it, that helps regulate. That's half the battle, to be able to regulate, is if you're conscious of it. And just be like, man, is this really a good idea for me right now? Or is this something maybe I should tone it down a little bit? Media literacy. Yeah.
I don't know if anybody knows who Hillsong is, but it's a huge organized church. And they had like a documentary. I don't know if it's on Prime or Netflix, but they actually design music to have a human with an emotional, a deep emotional response, that there's different chords that affect the human being differently. And they know what chords they are, so they design music and they can mess with it electronically to pull you in. And although the words, I think, to some of the music is so healing and inspiring, to think that there is a diabolical plot before that, because I'm more likely to give money to something that moves me so deeply, or share my um, life with them, and it was really kind of disappointing, but also just made me aware that we have to be conscious of what we're listening to and what we're visually taking in, that we have choices to make, and reasons why we should think about it instead of just mindlessly, jumping in with everybody else so we can be a part of conversations. Yeah, it's a lot.
Linda, it really makes me think too that in our role as advocates in people's lives, we have to acknowledge. So even though we've kind of spent the last month talking about how when we're working with survivors, that we're not in a, we don't have more smarts or more power or more whatever than the person. They're the expert in their own lives. But however, we do have to acknowledge that when somebody is seeking advocacy and they're looking to you for information and support and some possible answers or pathways, there is a power with that. And so making sure that we're, I don't know how to explain it, but when a person is wounded and they come to somebody who sees them and believes them and validates them, it can be, we have to stay healthy ourselves so we don't take advantage of the fact that somebody is looking to us for the resources. I hope that makes sense. I think it's we just have to be conscious of that. And when I've worked with folks, they want to like call me at home or and so it's about, oh my gosh, Elizabeth said it. I think I need to pay more attention to my boundaries. Although I've been better at upholding my boundaries, there's always room for improvement. So I think that is a legitimate thing for advocates, because we will go the distance for somebody. No matter what it takes, we're going to make it happen, right? And it's important that we also set clear boundaries for ourselves and clear boundaries with the folks that we're working with and for their sake and ours, right? Because it's their autonomy and their development and growth and healing that matter. And it can come at a cost if we're not careful in being clear with ourselves what we're capable of. Yeah. Good stuff, y'all.
So I think that we have been talking about the different things and sharing what might work for you personally, and then what you have witnessed or experienced working, what works for your organization or the place that you're working in.
Oh my gosh, I have another thought, because I'm still trying to figure out what words I'm trying to use about this boundary piece. But what I'm trying to convey is that sometimes you may be the first person that somebody discloses to, or you may be the first person who believes them and validates them fully as a human being. And it can be misinterpreted that you're the person with the answers. But our role as an advocate is to expand their circle of support, expand the people that they can reach out to for resources, expand their connection to our rituals and practices that are healing, right? So I don't become like a sole source of light or information, right? You don't want to be the sole source of anybody's life, right? Or light or healing. We want a big, huge circle of support. That's what I think I'm trying to get at. And it can be easy to misinterpret if we're not careful. because, therapists can become that for somebody that I can't make this decision without talking to my therapist. Like we've seen it happen in other modalities, right? So our advocacy is about expanding that circle of support.
I totally agree with that. And it can actually be like a power trip for some people, that somebody is calling you and they're trusting you and they're disclosing more and more. But we want to understand that they're living in the whole world. And while I am supporting and I am believing and I am acknowledging and validating everything they're saying, that this is a shared, there's other people who hold other pieces to that, but also instilling and providing support for them to grow in who they are, I think is powerful. Was that it? Oh my gosh.
Elizabeth shared a resource in the chat called Nevadi. So we'll make sure we add that to our list of links for resources for folks. Holy smokes, are we done with our 40-hour training? Well, thank you so much, Linda. That was awesome. This is my favorite module. Thinking about how we take good care of ourselves in all the ways. Does anybody have any questions for Linda before we do our final wrap up?
You made it. You need to give yourself a hand or a thumbs up or whatever you do. That's a lot of information you have had coming at you for the last few weeks. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. So I want to show a slide because it'll be just easier. So we have had about roughly 30 hours of like actual screen time with one another. And so if you remember to that very first module that we did with that privileged communication, so there's some requirements in your state or tribe on what privileged communication means, and you have to be working within a rape crisis environment. You have to have had that 40-hour training, and to add up to that 40 hours or to prove that you've had that 40 hours of training, you're going to have that certificate of completion, right? But since we've only been meeting from like 1 to 4:30 every day, that's not a full 40 hours. And the other part is that a big, huge component of being a good advocate is to know who your service providers are, okay? So wherever you're at, like when we have this in person in Minnesota, that's one thing, but since we're from all over the country, it looks a little bit different. And so it would make no sense for me to go meet your prosecutors, right? So part of your homework now is going to be to go out and meet your service providers. Set up an appointment with somebody at the police department, even if it's a dispatcher or whoever, or if there's a police officer who'd be willing to sit down and just chat with you. Just say, I'm a sexual assault advocate. I just want to know a little bit more about how you would respond to a sexual assault, right? So building those relationships, building that understanding, that's going to go a long way in your advocacy, because then you will have something in your mind about how it works, right? Going to the actual facility where a sexual assault forensic exam will occur. If you go and meet that person and ask them and say, hey, do you think I could get a field trip and go through, your facility? That will be a really helpful thing to understand how it feels in the room, what it smells like, you know, how long is the hallway that you have to walk until you get to the exam room, right? These are things that will help you have familiarity and be really helpful in your advocacy, okay? So I'm not going to like make you prove it to me or whatever. You know, we're trusting that this is going to be important to you to go meet these folks and to add up to your 40 hours of time. Okay, does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? I will add about this piece too, that in your appendices, so in each day, you might have to do a little digging. So when you're going to go to meet your SANE nurse, the person who does the forensic exam, go to the day that we had that training and open up that folder, and there'll be a little, it's like we made like a little cheat sheet basically. Like it's just a questionnaire. It has a couple of questions on there that you can ask. So you don't have to think it all up for yourself. At least that will help you have a little bit of framework about what to ask them. Okay, does that make sense? And the same thing for the law enforcement and the prosecutors and the mental health providers. There's an appendices in there. It's just a sheet that says, you know, these are some questions that you can ask the sexual assault investigator, or something, questions you can ask your prosecutor. Okay. And then Danielle said, who would you contact at the hospital to make an appointment like that? Well, just call the hospital and then ask them. You know, say that you are a sexual assault advocate and you're interested in talking to the sexual assault nurse examiner. And, you know, you might have to do a little hoop jumping to be able to set up an appointment with them. And that in and of itself tells you something. If you have to jump through hoops even to meet your SANE, then imagine what it could be like for a victim who has to go in and experience it firsthand, right? So part of it is like our learning and our familiarity about who to call and what questions to ask, when to keep pushing, right? If they keep giving you the runaround, then who else do you have to go to? Or do you have to walk right up to the clinic and walk in, right? And so that's going to be up to you how you want to approach that. Any other questions about the remaining homework? Okay. And so the certificate of completion, so we've tried it all different kinds of ways, but it's the best and easiest way to get you your certificate of information is to fill out the SurveyMonkey evaluation. And so I just dropped the link in the chat. And all that is a real easy to fill out. You just click on your feedback and let us know, you know, what worked, what didn't, you know, things that you felt like you didn't need to know, or things that like are really useful to you, you know, please share that with us. We take that feedback very seriously and do our best to try to make it right when we mess it up. And then also there'll be a section in there where you give me your email and your contact information of where you want me to email your certificate of completion. Okay. And I usually wait until most people have done the survey evaluation, because then I can just print out an Excel document and all the information is in one. Otherwise it gets to be a little, it gets to be crazy and hard for me to track who has received their certificate or not. So I'd kind of wait for, it might be a couple of weeks before you get your certificate of completion. Okay. All right. Well, any remaining questions? I cannot believe that we're done. We'll be having an in-person one at the end of September. So if you know of folks who doing it online is not for them, but being in person in a room with somebody might be better, then, you know, get in touch with me and I can make sure to give them the information.
where will the September event be held, the 40-hour?
It's going to be in Duluth, Minnesota, but I don't know exactly where yet. I'm still working with a couple of people trying to make sure we get a good venue. Yeah. Yes, yes, Ashley, you'll be in the final letter that you know how in that Zoom link thing, I always send all the links to all the days. I'll be sending you a full, like all of it, like all of the PowerPoints, all of the binder, like everything that you would normally get in a big, huge, thick, like 3-ring binder, that will be in that link. I'm so grateful to your brilliance and your commitment and courage to do this work, y'all. Holy smokes, there's like such brilliance out there, and it makes me cry actually. Like my respect and love for you all is just like profound. And we're so lucky to have you all. And to our interpreters, of course, oh my gosh. It's just, you know, when I'm not talking, like I'll be watching you, or even sometimes when I'm talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I'm saying. It's just beautiful. Forever grateful for you all. And to the team that's not here with us, of course, as well. Well, it is 4:31. You are all freely released from this training.
I wanted to show what I finished.
Yeah. It's kind of blurry. Pull it a little closer.
I don't know how to work that camera. Wait, let me see.
Try it a little closer.
Okay.
Yay, I see it. Danielle, that's gorgeous.
So I just finished it today.
Wow. Very cool. Okay, well, for those of you who have to log off right at 4:30, you are welcome to do so. If anybody would like our interpreters to stay on, just give me a quick private message and we'll keep them on.
Okay. Adios. Hope to see you guys in person in September.
Yes,
I'll do them both.
thank you. All right, Nora and Hercules, I think you're free to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. No, see you the next time, yeah. Hui ho, bye.
Okay, I'm gonna stop this recording. Oh, ooh, my face gets so big when I'm not in the little tile. It's not letting me pause it.